Times are made. Time to put my medal on. Whose neck to cut, I don't know. Whose side I'm on. There lies my sanity. There goes my mind, I could not say. I don't trust what I see right in front of me. I don't know who to betray. This is how villains are made. This is how villains are made. So easily repersuaded. When the lines of blood are faded, no one ever starts that way. This is how villains are made. This is how villains are made.
We will get through the uncertainty of a new administration in Washington. As I said, we've done this before. We've been through this. And
isn't necessarily the best place to start. In fact, I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is
You condemn white supremacy. And he fuddled around, didn't say anything. I said, how about the Proud Boys? And he said, well,
Ronald Reagan was 2 months into his presidency when John Hinckley Jr. blew a $20 million
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
If you want to
But I-
really see something that said, take a look what happened.
I want to take this message to talk to your viewers real quick about the story, the conversation we need to have now. The BOP is wasting lots of tax dollars in frivolous spending, and it's
Greetings, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The American Rising. I am your host, Barry Ramey. And some of you may or may not know that I did spend a few years in federal prison due to my participation of January 6th on that fateful day. So I want to come clear and be honest with everyone that there is a sense of bias within this expose and what we're about to talk about today. I did spend 3 years, as I just said, in federal custody where, like every one of my brothers and sisters that did so, they heard for 3 years, or in some longer, that 5 officers were killed that day at the hands of us. Of course, that is not true. It never was. And yet you don't hear much of a redaction at all or any type of apology from the left. In fact, they continue to say these things to this day. We all know about Ashley Babbitt. She was an unarmed Air Force veteran who had her hands up trying to get through a window that somebody else broke, and she was shot at point blank range by Capitol Police Officer Lieutenant Michael Byrd. Another story of that day that shows how J6ers did not kill police officers, yet they themselves were killed, was the story of Roseanne Boylan. A lot of people don't know the story of Roseanne Boylan and what happened to her that day. But I have for me and for you somebody very special that had a front row seat that day, an individual that I got to know personally. I was incarcerated with this individual in the DC Gulag pre-trial of January 6th. He is a former Nashville police officer. He is somebody that was trying to save a woman's life. Again, everything of this individual story can be backed up with video evidence. And yet, a lot of that evidence was attempted to be scrubbed from history. Well, we do know that the left, especially, and just in general, nobody tries to censor or hide lies. People, the left especially, try to censor and hide the truth. And make no mistake about it, the story of Roseanne Boylan and the Capitol Police officer Lila Morris that murdered her by beating her to death in front of my guest, Colton Maccabee, is a story that needs to be told and a story that is not known. And it isn't any different than anything the left permeates. I am bringing to the table my good friend, Colton Maccabee, who was there in the tunnel that day and tried to resuscitate Roseanne Boylan. He himself was beaten by Lila Morris and had a firsthand view of everything that took place that day. Colt, welcome. How are you doing? How has it been for you since being pardoned by the President of the United States?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Barry. I appreciate it. I've been doing all right since we've been out. I've hit the ground running, and I can see myself, see how far I've come since January 20th, since I let out of federal prison to now, and it's leaps and bounds.
Yeah. Well, we hear a lot about PTSD in today's society, and there's a lot of different things and elements of life that can bring it. I would assume that anybody that was in the tunnel that day, especially if they were sent to prison and listened for years with their hands and voices tied behind their back, that couldn't argue the truth and try to reverse the narrative being placed upon them, it must have caused some sense of post-traumatic stress, because all the while you're being called a white nationalist that killed police officers that day. And nothing could be further from the truth, not just for you, but everybody else around there and that involved in that situation. Let's talk about Lila Morris. I'm going to bring a picture of her up into the screen so people can see what she looks like. And I'm going to do that right now. This is Lila Morris. Lila Morris is the Capitol Police officer that can be seen beating a lifeless blue body to death. Colt, let me ask you a question. How many times did you witness Lila Morris, not just on Roseanne, but use her nightstick in that area that day?
She was beating everybody, anybody she can reach. I mean, she hit me. Another officer behind her hit me. I mean, and they were both smiling at it. They just went to town on anybody and everybody.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you tried at one point resuscitating Roseanne Boylan by performing CPR on her. What was going through your mind at that moment? What happened? What was that situation like for you at that moment?
Yeah, so let me start out with, we started CPR on Roseanne on the side where the steps are, and we couldn't get a pulse. And a group of us actually picked her up and carried her to the tunnel. And for our efforts, we actually got pepper sprayed by a whole bunch of people. And so when we sat her down, I'm sitting there like, oh my god, what is happening? They freaking killed somebody. And so the guy's yelling, I need compressions, I need compressions. So I start taking over. And I do, about 3 or 4 pumps. And I didn't do much, but I went hands on. And I got dragged off, and they dragged her through the tunnel, the police did, like a dead deer. And the whole thing that was going through my mind is, what the hell is going on up here?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. At this point, her body is physically blue. It can be seen on camera. I'm not just making this blanket statement. This can be seen on camera. So they're dragging this blue body through the tunnel, and now at this point, there's footage that is out there that shows them pretty much confused, not knowing what to do. They don't really perform any CPR on her after this point. Am I correct?
No, you're correct. Yeah, she's not only is she blue, but she's also bleeding from her ears, nose, mouth. I mean, she is. I mean, she's gone at this point.
And so Roseanne, before being dragged into the tunnel by the Capitol police officer and not receiving any type of CPR, before this is where she was beaten. Her lifeless body was beaten in the head and chest area multiple times by the baton of Lila Morris.
Yeah,
Would it
and
be
not
safe
only
to
that,
Sorry, would it be safe to assume that's where the blood was coming out of her eyes and nose? That may be the cause of that effect?
yeah, 100%, 100%. The beating of her only exasperated what happened.
Now, can we imagine a scenario? And let's not. I'm not going to put any specifics behind it. In a generalization, let's imagine a scenario. If you want to throw a riot in there, if you want to throw a civil unrest, if you want to throw all that into the equation, that's fine. But let's think about a scenario where a police officer can be seen beating someone with a stick over and over and over again. Okay, when this person is lifeless, they're not able to fight back. They're conscious, and this officer's beating them with a stick. What do you think the public's reaction would be to something like that?
Like, you're not a man if you don't jump in and help and drag that person out.
Absolutely. And on top of this, have we not seen, like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're going to say that excessive force by police officers looks like somebody getting beat with a stick, Rodney King, shouldn't it look the same when it's done to another person later on down the road? If we're going to call one police overreach, police excessive force, shouldn't that be the same thing? And you, an officer of the law, wouldn't you know what excessive force looks like?
Yeah, 100%. And in fact, beating somebody in the head with any type of baton, stick, or whatever is considered deadly force.
Yes. And I want just to say, to confirm that, I was a licensed executive security officer throughout my 20s. And I went through, which was honestly a joke, but a rigorous 6-month training. And one of the things when we did ASP training, as it was called, the collapsible baton, is that there is no state in the country where you can make a head strike. Everything must be below the collarbone. Am I correct in that statement?
100%.
There's not a single state, so it's basically by unison and unanimity that it's a federal law, because every single state adopts that within their law enforcement terms for using force with an asp or a baton.
Yeah, and I was trained several times over on how to use a baton, and they even updated on certain things on how to use the baton. And if you're in a riot control situation, you're not swinging a baton, you're holding it sideways and you're pushing back.
And that is not what we saw Lila Morris do that day. The photo, obviously, at the bottom now is Roseanne Boylan. She was pummeled to death by the baton of Capitol Police Officer Lila Morris, almost to the deafening silence of the left. I mean, let's be honest. They tried to cover it up. Colton, you and I were talking before, and you brought up the point that when they did a commercial about January 6th, they cropped Lila Morris out of that commercial. Can you take us through that as to why you think they would do something like that?
Yeah, because they want to cover it up. Because not only did they crop the commercial, they've erased her from almost everything. That's one of the reasons why I went to trial, to get the truth out. The Capitol Police even put a false report out and said that she was in the rotunda and just collapsed. It's all a lie.
Yeah, well, and as we sat in prison and we continue to hear this narrative be spun, it had to be somewhat extra frustrating for you, because you were there, you saw what happened. So I mean, they talk about, PTSD and what must have been going through your guys' head seeing this woman be beaten in her unconscious state, dragged into a tunnel, I can't imagine if I was there in that area what my response would be. I don't think it's any different than you guys. So to take that key element out, which is Lila Morris beating to death Roseanne Boylan, to try to scrub that from our eyes, shouldn't that tell us everything we need to know about January 6th? Just that one incident?
I mean, everything you said is true.
And the more that comes out, we continue to have more video proof and evidence. And now joining us is somebody to pretty much I don't think has done more research on January 6th in its entirety than this individual that I'm about to bring up. And I welcome to the stage David Summerall with StopHate.org. David, you are go ahead.
StopHate.com. If you
It
do
is
the other one, you'll be very sad.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Okay. I apologize. I even got it wrong on the bottom. I will go ahead and change that now. So,
Yeah, StopHate.com, brother.
all right. So my bad on that. And let's go forward on this, David. So Colt was just explaining to us his story and his close proximity to the Roseanne Boylan situation and what happened that day. David, what do you think is the most important thing that the public is missing or doesn't know about Lila Morris, her actions that day, and what happened to Roseanne Boylan?
Probably the big pause right in the middle between the Boylan thing. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah. Between the pause, Colt, you know what I'm talking about. When everything stopped, they said the police aren't going to beat us. We're going to sit here until, whatever. There's a period in between. People think this is a big violent thing the whole time, and it wasn't. It was sold that way. But I think the biggest bait and switch is probably with Fanone being called Bailey. The one cop that got drugged down head first, and everybody's led to believe that was Fanone, and he doesn't correct them. But if you'll look up in the top right portion of your screen, you'll see Lila Morris with that staff beating Roseanne's body in the corner. But they're trying to do this diversion thing. Don't look up there. Look here and look at Fanone being beaten. That's not Fanone, for one. That happened at a different time. And they've conflated with the timelines. They've used different video, and it just is not the same people that they're trying to represent. I think if we could figure out who picked Fanone and Lila Morris and Hodges to go to the Super Bowl, I think if we could figure out why the police chief said, give them hell in the tunnel, and then afterwards said publicly Lila Morris gave them hell, when they handed all these awards out to these criminals. I think those are the strings that need to be pulled. And unfortunately, our FBI isn't doing that right now for us. And they've had a year. And we've literally done more work to find all this out. And I don't know what people's opinions are about different J6ers or who's lying or who's telling the truth. There's so much controversy. But there's one guy that was in there that gave what he said was a statement to Marjorie Taylor Greene and the others that came to visit, and it's Troy Smocks, and he's got a reputation, and I don't know what people think or don't think, but he gave us paperwork that said he heard an officer say if she had to go down to the Capitol and she had to put on all that gear, she was going to beat the F out of some Trumpers, that the orders had changed. They weren't supposed to beat the crowd. They were supposed to look for Antifa or whatever. And the other officers were like, Morris, what are you talking about? And so he caught this last name. I pulled a picture out. I said, could you identify her? Would you recognize? Yeah. So I pulled this picture out. He said, yeah, that's her. That's her. He described her skin color and her hair before I showed him. You know what I'm saying? So it was really weird. And if that's something that was before, then we need to know that was premeditated for her to say, if I have to go down to the Capitol and put that gear on, I'm going to beat the F out of some of them. So she went with intent. How did she get from the back of the tunnel to the front of the tunnel to do that? How did Fanone show up late that day, make it all the way through the tunnel, down in the crowd, back up and back through? I mean, nobody made it through this tunnel. This, unless you're Victoria White and they hit you for 3 minutes in the head with a baton and then drag your carcass through there. Or if you're Roseanne Boylan and they kill you and they break the defibrillator and they give every hope that you had of life away for politics and put you on a cart and roll you down the hall. And listen, we've got the paramedic stories. That's what I think people should see, is their own words of saying that when they got to Roseanne Boylan, she was drenched in this spray. Now, how long had it been before it took paramedics to get there? And for them to say it's still dripping off her body, that it was excessive, that there was so much, and then not to tell the story about the defibrillator, or all Officer Dunn and Officer Gunnell, all these other policemen that supposedly touched her body to try to render it's just, it's beyond fiction. You couldn't write something so involved. You see Gunnell walking out with no limp, no injury, no nothing, but all of a sudden he needs a corrective foot surgery. So they blame that on Jay. Oh, now he's gimped for life. And you see him in court, because I've testified against these people, or as alongside, and I see him in court, and he's wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt. So it's terrible, I can't work, and all these things. But then you see him on Fox the next day in a suit saying, we are respectable police. And I'm like, what is wrong with the public to take a story like Roseanne Boylan and be told she died of acute amphetamine overdose? And the public said, yeah, okay, because people die from drug overdoses at Trump rallies every day, every time. There's been hundreds of deaths because there's been hundreds of rallies. No, like never. Like, people don't do meth at a Trump rally. And yet the public was fed this line. And I hate to keep ranting, but let me just say Officer Sicknick was the same thing. They took that story, they made it up, and they pushed it to the public for months and months and arrested people under that pretense that these people killed one of the police. And we know how bogus that was. It's the shock and awe. It's the intentionality. It's the maliciousness of this weaponized Department of Justice and FBI. And I think that's the moral of the story, that if Americans are willing to sit by and be duped, then they will. And we saw that happen for quite some time. And it took us probably 2 years. I can remember the first time Kara Castronova called me and said, David, you know more about all the deaths and nobody seems to be interested in them. And I said, well, that's the most important thing. I'll do anything I can to help you get those stories out. She had a bigger platform. But I put out the first documentary, Writing History, RIGHTING, Writing History, the Journalistic Battle of January 6th. And it rages on. At the very bottom, you'll see that. But what we did was took Philip Anderson's testimony, who was right there at the scene of the crime, was drug out of the crowd unconscious and luckily revived, unlike Roseanne, and was brought back to life. Basically, you see his lifeless body, and people thought he was dead, and they start pulling bodies out, and he breathed. And he told me, David, I was there, and I was holding this lady's hand until I lost consciousness.
Yeah.
And I've known Philip for years, man. And why would he lie to me about that? And I was putting this documentary out in June of 21, the very first J6 documentary that I know worth its weight. And I put his testimony there, and people said, you can't do that. You don't have the evidence. And I said, I have his word. We're friends. Why would people lie about what they experienced? Why do you instantly jump to, oh, that can't be true, instead of, well, let's figure it out and see? This is a witness testimony. I know it's kind of weird that it's not just opinion, but he was there.
Right.
And right as we were about to put our documentary out, Gary McBride found the one clip on the news that they showed where the one guy was rushing the crowd like he was a wild man, but down in the corner you could see Roseanne's body and people trying to do, treat her, CPR, whatever, render aid. And so that was the screenshot that we stuck in that first documentary. But I'm telling you, why did the media on our team never focus on the deaths? Because it's the most important thing that the public needs to understand, that we had our own Tiananmen Square massacre where the police murdered protesters, blamed them for it, put them in prison to cover it up, confiscated all their media, their phones, their computers, everything that had the video that was up close, guys like Colt that were there, and then tried to make our media and everyone else cover it up. Man, that's straight out of China.
I agree. And let's take it from Lila's perspective, or the leftist perspective, if you will, for a minute. And let's just go with, okay, we were under attack. We were being attacked by all the J6ers and we had to put up a defense. Let's just, for argument's sake, we'll go with that, right?
Right.
So then let's fast forward to Lila Morris. At what point does that story hold up or that narrative hold up when she's seen beating a lifeless body? I don't know how many times. She could have spent more time beating other people that were attacking her, right?
That's very true.
She's now focused and homed in on a blue body, clearly asphyxiated, clearly not conscious, continuing to hammer this one person. Why wouldn't she stop and continue to hammer other people? The 300 giant Viking warriors in front of her that are all apparently all high on meth. Why not continue your front against them? Why beat this lifeless body?
Let me offer you this. From the perspective in the tunnel looking out, the strikes seem to be going forward to the crowd, but the extension of it lower is hitting her body on the ground. I truthfully don't know that she knew she was there. I truthfully don't know that she beat her on purpose. I believe she was trying to strike out at the crowd in front of her, but as it went below the striking point, it was hitting her body randomly. Now you'll see the other guy with the big hockey stick sticking it in there. Now he's not trying to hit her, he's trying to block her blows strategically. And you'll see the very last one hits right at her hand and knocks that stick out of her hand and disarms her. Now, he's not trying to beat her in the head with it or anything. He was literally trying to block. He could see what was going on beneath him, but she was striking at the crowd. And when it went below that point, I think is when she was striking over. So I'm not saying it's intentional against Roseanne. I will say the intentionality of it comes from her previous statement. If that's true, then she had, ulterior motive. She had anger. She had issues. She shouldn't have been, she's not neutral. She's not protective. And I think that's when you deem every bit of violence that day objectively reasonable to cover it. And, the baton strikes in the head, they're not in the police reports. We've got them all on videos all over, but they didn't put them in the police. Those are lethal strikes, and they're going to hide those things. They did an exit interview with the FBI, all the Capitol Metro Police, sat down with the FBI and said, let's get our stories straight so that everything that we put into these reports mirrors itself and helps cover their intentionality, their choreographed chaos, and the fact that they set this up and let it continue for hours. When the National Guard finally came in, it took like 6 minutes.
Right.
And everybody was off, done. So
I remember being there, and I remember everyone getting that alert on their phone because everyone's phone just started working for them to all get a unanimous ring out that the mayor had called for a 6:30 p.m. curfew. And I remember hordes of people just leaving to respect the curfew. So, some great insurrection there. I want to get into something that you said real quick that I think is very important is the collaboration in getting their story straight. Let's talk about Roseanne Boylan's toxology report and what they said her death was. Colt, what do you know about that? You were in prison. You're hearing this is actually tied to your case. So your lawyers are trying to find out things. You're able to get some things because you're brave enough to go to court. You want to take this. You want to get information to the public. What were you told it was the reason Roseanne was dead?
I was told that the coroner decided that she overdosed on, I guess, ADHD medication or something like that. And knowing the truth, I witnessed the truth, that I became so livid. I mean, I don't know if you heard me on the phone, but I was yelling at my lawyer that day.
Yeah. So, David, now what do you know about that? Where did that coroner's report, where did that all go wrong? I know you did a lot of work on that. What was the main thing you found that was extremely ominous?
Well, the cover-up, of course, incinerating all the bodies does not help when you want to further investigate matters. And we know Ashley was voluntary. That was her wishes to be cremated, but I believe there was a little bit of a coercion by the Department of Justice when they contact these families and say, look, we have your loved one's body, but to ship it home, it's going to be $6,000 or $8,000. But if we cremate it for you, we can send it home for a couple $100. And they're thinking, well, we don't have a choice. So good. Okay, we got another one. Kevin Greason, Benjamin Phillips, Roseanne Boylan, all conveniently cremated. And yet the coroner didn't put cause of death as much of manner of death. So you don't see anything in Kevin Greason's report about flashbang grenades going off around him when he had this medical emergency. You just think, well, he had a heart attack because that stopped his heart, that killed him, so that's the cause of death. But what's the manner of death? Same with Roseanne. That they said amphetamines, like ADHD medicine, people immediately think methamphetamines.
Right.
I
Not
think
Adderall, which that's what it was.
I think the media went and saw her record, saw she had a past, saw she had dabbled or whatever, and they didn't follow up with the last 6 or 7 years that she'd spent working at a rehab facility to help others with this same problem. And when you see her, she doesn't look like your stereotypical string bean meth addict. It looks like somebody went through recovery and maybe had issues with their metabolism after that. She was no skinny mini,
Yeah.
and that doesn't scream meth to me.
Well, if she was in fact a longtime meth user, I don't think she would have held on to that significant weight. Let's just be honest about it. Cole, you were there. You were in the front. What is your feelings? You saw things. Do you think that Lila Morris targeted her baton towards Roseanne Boylan
So
deliberately?
what I think is, so you have Officer Andrew Waite, and Officer Lila Morris pushing people out of the tunnel, and more specifically on top of Roseanne. You have Justin Winchell, Roseanne's friend, saying, "You've got a lady trapped under here. She's dead. She's dead. Rose, or whatever he said." And then, I have the privilege of watching body cam footage before trial. I saw that she stepped on top of Roseanne to start reaching for more people. I mean, I believe that she got it so fixated on trying to hurt everybody that, David said, she might be reaching for the crowd, but her strikes were hitting below and hitting Roseanne super hard. And then she freaks out and gets taken back to the back. So, I mean, I think once she realized what she was actually doing, that's when reality set in.
You said she was taken to the back. She was taken to the back by other officers.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So was it kind of because
yeah.
she was so aggressive? You think?
Well, if you watch her body camera footage, after the stick gets knocked out of her hand, she'll start like hyperventilating or something, and then that's when she gets pulled back to the back by other officers. And she's not that big of an officer anyway. So what is she doing on the front lines?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Let me ask you, why are any women at the front line with all these Vikings in front of them trying to eat them and bite them in half and stuff? I mean, it makes 0 sense unless that's part of the op. Look at this poor woman. She's such a hero. She fought valiantly. And with the Fanon story and the HBO made for TV Fable thing, they're able to distract the public's view from Roseanne up in the corner, like I said, down to Hodges, and run with the story from there. It infuriates people to think that we hurt police officers at all, and that they were defending democracy and defending these. They're still fighting for this plaque to get that stupid plaque, and if they get the plaque, all they ever have to do is point to it and say that's the story right there. That's what happened, and that's why we're fighting against things like that. They're trying to make this history fit their narrative for power and control, the Tiananmen Square cover up, and that's why we're having this chat today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the same people that called me a traitor to my country for wearing the badge is the same people calling me a traitor to my country for defending the Constitution and democracy.
Right.
I mean, the left hates me for being a cop and then being a J6er, so I can't win.
What you just said right now is so important and brilliantly put, by the way, because they constantly show their own hypocrisy. We're talking about the left that let's make no mistake about it. They hate this country. They show us every single day. And just because for the last 3 No Kings protests, they decided to wave made in China little flags around at their fucking protest doesn't negate the last 30, 40 years of shitting on this country. So you would think that if we were really insurrectionists, that they would be like, man, these are our fucking guys. But just like the death of George Floyd and the burning and the hypocrisy that they all did behind that bullshit narrative, when the same narrative applied to Ashley Babbitt, it didn't, because she was a Trump supporter. They're constantly showing how their moral fabric can be untangled at the very seams at which holds it together. It's all bullshit for them.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. We show the video that Taylor really exposed, I guess, a couple of years ago, and it didn't catch on then either. But we've done a deeper dive, a bigger expose on Ashley pulling back Zachary along by the backpack and punching him in the face and knocking his glasses off and then taking that position. Why? Because John Sullivan had talked those 3 police officers into leaving the windows unguarded, and the other police officers coming up the stairs with the long guns stopped to talk to the staffer. So it was unguarded, and she was the MP. She had the experience. She was the one begging the police to get reinforcements. Look at all these people, and there's more coming. You need to get more help. And then she takes the position and gets shot and is blamed as, oh, she was part of this violent mob. Like they started everyone's opening statements in court. Everyone was deemed part of this violent mob that descended on the Capitol and blah, blah, blah.
We were
And
all
then
tips of the spear.
denied their First Amendment rights to say that, hey, I was there to pray, or I was there to protest, or I was there with the media, or to gather in a group, or to redress my grievances. No, no, no. First Amendment is off the table. I don't want to hear that kind of talk in my courtroom. I've got the quotes, man. And it's really horrendous and ridiculous to think that no journalists per se showed up every day to cover what was happening in these courtrooms. And the ones that say they were there weren't there. They were on court listener, and they were pushing a narrative as well to cover. Like I said earlier, they weren't talking about the things that were as important to the day, like the deaths, like the brutality, like the civil infractions, like everyone at the front gate, all their civil rights were violated because they were attacked without warning. Period. End of story. For the first hour, it wasn't deemed a riot. And when it was really just a police riot. The people were still standing there going, what are you doing to us? Why are you? We're here to, and they were on their megaphones. We're here to redress our grievances. Please don't shoot us. Please don't spray us. So when people understand the level of propaganda that's, and they talk about, oh, it's the worst thing in history, biggest investigation. It's the biggest cover up ever. And it's so important that it became a leading election issue. And I believe led to Trump getting reelected, which led to the pardons, which was all part of the 4-year plan that we had to get these people out of prison, or they'd still be sitting there. Our politicians aren't helping on either side. They're not asking stories about Roseanne. They're not asking Colt to come on and talk at the RNC thing or anything. I mean, this is ridiculous that no one's talking to these survivors of political terrorism. I mean, there's no other way to put that, and yet nobody wants to talk about it and sweep it under the rug. Why? So they can do it again.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And so, Colt, let me ask you this: what was some things that happened in your case? You felt like they were trying to scrub and remove Lila Morris, and you went forward with this to get more information out there. What were some hurdles you hit with trying to get that information?
Well, first and foremost, even going through bond hearings, they refused to play the audio. They refused to sit there and put everything together. They said my situation with Officer Waite and then Roseanne Boylan were two separate issues, even though it happened during the same time. Going through trial, the prosecution put in a motion to sit there and basically erase Roseanne's existence and said, I can't even talk about it. And the judge ruled in our favor. So we actually could do it. But even if he ruled that I couldn't, I was getting on the stand no matter what and speaking her name because I already knew I was going to prison. What else I have to lose?
And there's a clear case of the prosecution or the government trying to stop you and preemptively prevent you from even bringing up something that is pertinent to your case.
Right, and I couldn't even use defense of a third party or even self-defense on my own. And, I mean, we all see the videos. You see me help an officer, you see me push an officer, and then you see me do CPR. I mean, if I was – the prosecution said I went there that day to cause mayhem and to sit there and attack police officers. And if I wanted to do that, I would have stayed at work.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Correct me if I'm wrong. You, after performing CPR, you turn away, and when you turn your back, you're hit in the head by Lila Morris's baton?
No, this is before.
Before.
So I'm reaching towards Roseanne and trying to get the officers to look at Roseanne. Now, I have Officer Waite between my legs to prevent him from being dragged down the stairs. And I see Roseanne right there. She's already blue at this point, and I'm reaching across. And then I get hit in the head, and I pop up, and I yell, you can't do that. That's deadly force with a lot of other inflammatory language. And then another officer comes down, and I push him away because he hit me with a baton in the ribs, and I get dragged down. And when I bring that officer back up, that's when I start searching for Roseanne again, and that's whenever people are doing CPR on her on the side. and I went and helped lent my services.
David, what have you noticed as far as the whole thing around Lila Morris and them giving her a medal of honor and then taking her to the Super Bowl? What do you think that was all about?
Man, you have to have them being the victims, and there's no better way to do that than with a minority woman against a big white mean crowd. I mean that's the narrative that they tried to push the entire time. These are racist, they're white nationalists, they're neo-Nazis, they're Klansmen basically, and they all descended on the White House to overthrow their fragile democracy, and we know better. This constitutional republic still stands because we didn't go through there and disassemble the building brick by brick and eat all the policemen. That wasn't our intention. And the fact that we let them get away with this as a country, that's the part that's disturbing to January Sixers, is that nobody cares what they went through. And it's not about fame and fortune, guys. It's about justice. But guess what? You can't get restitution or reparations before you get justice. And if no one in the Congress and the Senate and none of the media is helping us with that, we have big problems. We got a couple of lawsuits that are like class action, a couple of individual. But what's going to happen in same courts that we went through for 4 years that wouldn't self correct, that had to be corrected with a pardon from the president? We can't go back and forth like this every 4 to 8 years, waiting for all the good guys to get released from the administration and waiting for the next ones to get locked up back and forth. That's not the way this is supposed to work. And these people never had a fair shot in trial. Never. It should have never been in trial, in my opinion. And for going to a peaceful protest, being attacked literally by the police, that's the story nobody would tell for about the first 2 years. In the third year, they finally started to understand, well, maybe, you hear some of these lead journalists on our team finally can't refute our work any longer. I think it was October in 23, we put out 1,000 Days of Terror, and it showed about 20 minutes of the day in about a 5.5 minute film. And it shows the police attack a peaceful crowd. It's pretty cut and dry. And right after that, they're all saying, oh, it's come to our attention. What? You've known this stuff. You've been hiding it, holding back, milking it, dripping it out while we got this fire hose trying to go over here. So it's been like that, man. And people still, when they find out some of these journalists and their history and their past and what they were doing, they find out now, 4 years later, they weren't our friend. Oh my gosh, you think? So what all did they hide from you for 4 years by talking about Ray Epps or talking about the Gallows or Mr. Coffee or anything that was more of a distraction than brutality and murder? Because I think those are really the most important. And there is no statute of limitations on January 6th. I want people to be very assured. It involved death. And therefore, there's no statute of limitations on that. And it involves foreign countries. So there's no statute and conspiracy, everything else. I'm not worried about the timer running out on this. I'm just afraid of them running it out long enough until Trump's gone and then nobody ever sees justice for it. We cannot let that happen.
Well, you brought up a very interesting point, and I find personally that that's kind of the wall we hit when it comes to the middle of the road, middle American, or even the moderate, retarded conservative. It stops with oh well, you guys attacked the Capitol. No, we did not attack the Capitol. In fact, you can just look at the footage where we could focus on the West Side because that's where all the crazy shit happened.
That's right.
People gathered. They were singing the national anthem with their hands up when Capitol Police began to indiscriminately fire munition rounds into the crowd. It was the equivalent of kicking a fucking hornet's nest. It goes by every policy for crowd against every policy they have for crowd control. It's what you do, the context of what you do not do. They did that day, and it's so the normal people, all they're able to see, because the media has done such a good job at pounding that in, is that violent nationalists attack the Capitol. And so how do we get around that?
I think you show them, man. I think you show them. And here's the deal. Everybody showed these little clips, and that's what they did. They selectively edited, omitted, big chunks and little pieces and used just what they wanted to strategically build a story that they wanted to share with America, the fable. But I think if you look at the first gate and you compare it to a Black Friday, how many people died at the first gate? Zero. How many people die at Black Fridays? Some, So, it's less violent than shopping for Christmas at times when you're fighting over Nintendos and things. So, just to know that, and then to watch the video, these people did not attack the police at the first gate. They attacked the gate at the first gate. They attacked the gate, not the police. And that's a huge difference that people don't understand. They think as soon as they got on the property, people just started decimating cops. But you see, for the next several 10 minutes at least, 15 probably, they're up at the front, gathering, getting thick, getting thick. They're never given an exit route. They're never given a warning. They never use the giant speakers. They came out a couple of hours later with a little bitty speaker and you're supposed to leave the property. And if you don't, but they didn't use that text on our phones to say, hey, you're committing crimes. You need to leave now. They could have done that, but instead they said, hey, be out of here and back at your room by 6 o'clock. Until then, what? Enjoy the show and let the police beat on us some more and infuriate the crowd, like you said so eloquently. So, I mean, that's exactly where we were. And for them to be able to spin that past the concern of the normal average citizen, because they thought, like they were told, we went and did stupid things. We screwed it up for everybody. We messed up the election for Trump, and if it wasn't for us, things would be different. And both sides hated us, man. It was the hardest thing to get people to just change their mind a little bit. And we did that through a community, through video, just showing what happened, testimony. We try to gather as many people's phone videos as we could before the FBI comes and takes them all, like everyone experienced. So we built a database, man, and went to work and testified in cases, doing things that normal Americans are supposed to do for each other, man. I have friends from junior high and before that I don't speak to anymore because they didn't believe me. They believed the media. They didn't believe somebody that we grew up together and we have a bond, we have trust, we have these things, but they saw the power of the media and propaganda. And we're no longer friends because of that form of manipulation. I mean, that's some strength, guys, to know you grow up with these people, you have bonds, and then you lose your family, you lose your friends, you lose all your social, you lose your church, you lose your school, whatever you're associated with. People don't get it, man, because of that smear. And I think once this justice thing comes back around, I really expect great payments, but we have to have someone guilty. You have to have a culprit. You have to have charges. You can't just say, hey, they did us wrong and we deserve it, because everybody knows you deserve it. But if you don't have somebody to point that to and say it's him or them or they or this or the judges, because we've got everything. Just like Cole says, man, it was intentional. We had to fight to get certain videos into court, couldn't get some, couldn't get audio for real. You couldn't point at anything. You couldn't mark it. It had to be originals. They didn't like the publics as much. There were battles to get these videos. And then the reporters that were covering these stories, they were selective as well. Or they would never say who found the videos, where to get more. They just say, oh, look what popped up in court today. And wow. And then they get credit like they found it or something. And then all eyes are on them. And they never tell you the goods, and they never help, and they never put the little people's names in their posts so they could actually get support for their own Give, Send, Go or something. It's like they did it for journalism and for money and likes and clicks instead of to help the people, which we all know is true, man. It's disgusting, and people need to wake up to that, because now that it's popular, everybody can talk about J6. Everybody can make a buck or two off of J6. Where were you when we were fighting, risking our lives and our fortunes and our reputation all out there, and y'all wouldn't let us come on your shows to talk about J6 because it was off limits or you weren't allowed? I remember it. I mean, everybody does. And that's the part that's disturbing as a society, man. That's how Hitler happened. That's how if whatever. But yeah, this is how bad things happen. Let's just put it that way. And it seems like our government, once again, is in charge of it and the history of it.
Sure. I mean, and so just to touch on something you said, they continuously pushed a false narrative. They continuously told our stories for us and didn't allow us to tell our stories. They censored us in prison. They stopped us from talking to the media. Sure. They prevented us from doing that. And real quick, again, something good you said. I find it personally that I know what to expect from the left. All right. I not only being a Proud Boy, but a J6er, I get it. They hate me. That's fine. That actually brings a smile to my face. But I do find it that it's the middle of the road moderate conservatives that hate us even more. And I've experienced it in my local Republican club here in where the county that I attend. some of the people are awesome, good people. They've really welcomed me with open arms, but a lot of them, they don't even talk to me. Like the city councilman, the president of the club, the Republican club, he won't even talk. He hates my guts because of he believes that we attacked the Capitol and tried to overthrow the government. Now, this cuck that I'm talking about will put on a MAGA hat and claim to be MAGA, but he doesn't want to talk to the J6er. But it must leave a foul taste in his mouth knowing that the commander in chief pardoned me.
Well, I think there's a lot of controversy about that too. And people think, well, he pardoned criminals. He pardoned his lynch squad. He pardoned the people he told to go down there and attack the Capitol, and they attacked the Capitol, and then he pardoned them. So, the deal is done, whatever. And that's not, of course, the case, but they don't understand that just the pardon didn't fix the problem. It got us out of prison, got us out of the Shank situation for the most part. Now it's just the public life threats and things like that that we have to do, not the prison ones, which is good. But, nobody needs to be in prison for it for sure, but it's not over yet. And we expected justice, and I'm not sure that it's over. I know that we're going to continue to fight like it's not. But I think when you look at the way that they came out of the gate swinging about Officer Sicknick getting killed with a fire extinguisher by these people. I think when you look at Hakeem Jeffries and you hear the way when they're speaking to a crowd, the 4 officers who died as a result of January 6th is not 4 officers that died on January 6th
Not
or
anymore.
necessarily even as a result. But when you're trying to cover 4 civilian deaths that happened that day, you want to say it like that. The 4 officers' deaths that resulted from January 6th. That's just sleight of tongue, man. That's magic tricks that these people are playing on our friends and neighbors. And the whole Officer Sicknick thing, the little retraction came out in April that, he was not killed by a finger. It was just a stroke to brain and not related to January 6th. But who heard that retraction? Who saw it? Who read it? Because we still, like I said, had friends being arrested by police that would say that to them. Why are you doing this to me? Because your people killed one of our people with a fire extinguisher. No, do that back in April. They said that's no, yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. No, and these are the lies, man. They're strong. And we see this, and there's really only the truth to fight that with, man. Makes for a long battle because it's easier to go for the drama and the make-believe stuff than it is these realistic, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. And I don't like it because there's no drama involved in it.
Yeah. Well, Colt, we lost your camera. If you can get that back on, that'd be great. But can you hear us? All right. Colt got is taking a hiatus, but it is going forward. What do you think we can do, as far as getting this word out there, exposing Lila Morris and her individual actions that day, how they did not coincide with anything that law enforcement's taught, and that you can be mad at the protesters that you want to label as rioters, but let's talk about this individual action. How do we get people to even know who Lila Morris is?
Man, we've got to do better with our PR. We've got to get our public relations up. We have to let people see these videos and hear the stories from the witness, and that's what we do. It's all we do. But there's such a censorship and shadow banning block or whatever. We have our little community, and we're all loud and clear in our little community, but it doesn't get outside of that. It's just the echo chamber, and we see that. But I'm telling you what the public can do, what J6ers can do, is keep filing FOIA requests, keep filing for information about who picked Lila Morris and others to go to the Super Bowl, who was in charge, who were the handlers of Michael Leroy Bird after the shot was fired, who took these people away to a base and trained them, who's Tarek Johnson, how does he play into all this, to have all this knowledge and be going to help the whole time, and just kind of kick the ball down the road, kick the can, and never really helped as much. And yet the Oath Keepers, they supported him up into the building to get police and come back down. He wouldn't testify for it. I mean, they went to prison. They're still just commuted, not pardoned. So we have all these things that are undone. There's FOIA requests that the public can do. It's not super hard. And there's, of course, social media. You can keep posting and sharing. But other than that, I think people need to start filing lawsuits, bro. And here's the reason I say that. Trump is tearing a new one in the BBC because they maliciously edited the video, right? They cut out 50 minutes and made him say, okay, here we go. Let's go get him. And that's not the way it sounded in real life. And they really, curbed a lot of people's, thoughts about what January 6th. Well, we know HBO did the same thing. We know the Select Committee did the same thing. Maybe he's setting an example by suing them for $10 billion. At first he said 1 to 5 billion. I don't know yet. But then he says $10 billion. Okay, so now if you know HBO did the same stuff and you know the select committee, I don't know how you can sue the select committee yet, but I know you can sue HBO. They're the sister of the BBC. I mean, they work together on everything.
Sure.
And then if you get the select committee's production crew, you know, those TV guys that help them with that fake sham committee thing with the teleprompters and the questions and the made for TV hearings that weren't real hearings, then maybe we can keep turning. Because like I said, we've got to at some point have a culprit, you know, somebody that's in defense of what they did. And until you can put a name tag on that, you can't just say, oh, Nancy Pelosi didn't have the national. You know, it's kind of like what they did to the election. It was 1,000 little cuts instead of like one or two big things that you could see. So
Death
when
by
you own the
1,000 cuts.
media and you own the courts and you own the marshals and you own the prisons and you own everything, then you can pull something like this off. The thing that they did not expect was that J6ers actually never surrender. And we're going to fight until we're dead if we have to. And then we'll probably fight some more. And you might make us even more famous than we were, because we've had 30 deaths in our community the public still didn't know about. We've had a dozen or more suicides, not just Perna. There's 11 more than him. But for some reason, selectively, he's the only one they talked about. But there's been 11 more that we know of. Come on, there's reasons that our lead propagandists on our team didn't tell these whole truths, that they've milked this information out. Why doesn't the public know Colt's story? Why don't they know about Roseanne Boylan? Because none of them are on our team, bro. That's the harsh realization that it took us 4 years to grow into that. The first 2 years we tried working with politicians. Oh, we want to help you. We're going to listen, but hey, the midterms are coming up. We got to lay low for a minute. And when we're back, then we'll help. No, you never did help before. You sure didn't help after. You kicked the can down the road, and these people would still be in prison if it were for y'all, if it wasn't for President Trump. So I think everything we need to do is to contact him. I think January 6th is a great opportunity. You know, we're doing a vigil every Thursday night in DC, maybe not every Thursday night. I know holidays fall on some, et cetera, but Thursday nights at the White House, you know, at 6:30, people are holding signs up saying J6 isn't over. Trump, we want to support you. We're trying to get your attention to let you know what's really going on, what we need. If you gave the power to the people, here's your chance to have a vehicle to put it into.
No, absolutely. No, yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, you gave a lot of great points. Colt, before you disappeared for a minute, we were talking about what we think moving forward. What is the most important things people need to know about Lila Morris, the situation that you were right there and witnessed, what happened to Roseanne Boylan, and what do you think people need to know? How can we get this information out there about who Lila Morris is and what she did that day? I don't have your mic, buddy. All right. Okay. Well, I mean, we'll wrap. Can we hear you? Nope. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead. Nope. No sound, buddy. Sorry. I'm going to go ahead and remove you from the screen real quick. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up with this, man. And David, Colt, I want to thank you both for coming on and talking about this. It's a very important situation and that people do not know about. And I really want to get that out there. And going forward, I really want to make Lila Morris a household name, if you would say. And so I plan on doing that on January 6th, all legally, all within good fun, no harm, no ill will towards anybody. But I hope that on January 6th that Lila Morris and Lieutenant Michael Byrd will be a household name, because it should be, like you said. So, David, thanks again, man. StopHate.com. .com. David Summerall has compiled probably the most extensive and thorough conglomerate of information surrounding January 6th, and I highly encourage everyone to check out his website. He has had some amazing help, but he has taken the lead on this, man. And David, we know in our heart of hearts you have done so much good for this.
Bro, I just try to keep people motivated. Daniel Goodwin is the mastermind of the computer and has really been the backbone of compiling this information. It's easy to find it sometimes, but to keep it is another chore altogether. And it's been difficult because they erase things all the time. But, bro, thanks for having me on. Let's do this again real soon.
Absolutely, man. And I will see you in D.C. in January, brother.
Yes, you will.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for tuning in. Again, this was a short expose on Capitol Police Officer Lila Morris. Lila Morris used every wrong tactic she could that day, and it ended in the death of Roseanne Boylan. And the video proof is out there. The evidence is there. You're just going to have to want to look at it. So Lila Morris, I would like to say, in the unlikely event that you ever do see this, I know that the narrative against us is going to be maintained that we're insurrectionists and we're terrorists and we're white nationalists and whatever you can do to, keep that going, because you have to in order to live with yourself. You have to keep that narrative going because the truth hurts. And I don't think you want to live in the truth. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to The American Rising. I am your host, Barry Ramey. Please follow the X page at The American Rise, also on Facebook and TikTok now. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot of work to do. I'm looking forward to getting it done.
We will get through the uncertainty of a new administration in Washington. As I said, we've done this before. We've been through this. And
isn't necessarily the best place to start. In fact, I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is.
You condemn white supremacy. And he fuddled around, didn't say anything. I said, how about the Proud Boys? And he said, well,
Ronald Reagan was 2 months into his presidency when John Hinckley Jr. blew a $20 million
about blowing up the White House.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look what happened